Hello, everyone. I hope your day is going well. Today is Monday, March the 3rd. And for those of you who may be new to the channel, my name is Dr. Tanisha Brown. I am a practicing dentist in Central Ohio, and I also have many different passions: UFC, writing, photography, journaling, as I'm gonna be talking about today, and just many other things. So what I kind of wanted to talk about today is I wanted to check in. I guess I want you guys to check in um, with your New Year's resolutions. We are at the time right now where I think statistics say that close to 80% of people by the month of March have given up on their New Year's resolutions and their goals altogether. So now is a good time to kind of check in with yourself about how you're doing with your goals. Have you given up? And if so, why? If you haven't given up, how much progress have you actually made? And are you tracking that? And that's kind of what I've been focusing in the last couple of days. And this is just what works for me. Um, per my last video, I wasn't necessarily in a good place when I was filming that. I took a brief weekend trip to Seattle to see a UFC fight, and I didn't go into massive amounts of detail, but the Thursday before I left was just a very, very, I'm not going to call it traumatizing, but it was one of those days where I left work and I just kind of sat in my car and I just cried a little bit. I take that back, I cried a lot. So I was feeling some type of way when I went on that trip. I enjoyed it for what it was, but I didn't enjoy it 100% the way I would have had my nervous system been nice and settled. So, getting back to my journaling practice, what I want to focus in on the month of March is healing any money wounds that I have. And I know that I have some. All people have money wounds. It's not something that's really talked about. But once you figure that out, I'm reading this very good book. It's called From Wounds to Wealth, and I'm discovering a lot about my upbringing and looking back at my beliefs about money, how I spend money, how I save, how I invest, how I feel, when I get paid versus what I feel when I splurge. These are all things that I'm kind of looking at in the month of March. I call it Money March Makeover. And I typically focus in on money issues, or just looking at money. That's typically what I do every single March. I call it Money March. In February, I always typically do something different with my diet. For this past February, I tried OMAD, and I'm still actually practicing OMAD. For anybody who doesn't know what OMAD is, it's one meal a day, and it's basically what it sounds like. It's like you're condensing your eating time to just one big meal, and there's some pros and cons to it. I thought it was going to be a lot harder than it was, but eating one meal a day is kind of what I kind of grew up with. Once I got into high school, it was kind of, I would eat a Pop Tart before I went to school, but I typically always skipped lunch and I just had one big dinner. So that kind of goes back to my old school eating habits. So I may do a separate video on that, but I typically always do dietary changes in February because February is the shortest month. And if I'm suffering in any way with the diet, at least it's not as long. So I'm still going with the OMAD. That's something that I'm going to practice for a little bit, and I'll tell you guys about that in a different video. January, I tried to focus on my social life a little bit more, um, which was probably not the smartest thing to do. Being in Ohio, despite the fact that winter comes every single year, despite the fact that it snows every single year and it gets cold, people act like it's new to them, and a lot of people are just not wanting to socialize and be out of the house when it's cold and gray and just dreary, and people tend to be, you know, they're spent from the holidays, from a financial standpoint, from a mental and emotional standpoint. I think a lot of people just want to chill in January. So, I did go out, I made some new friends, one of which I reached out to today. I went on 2 dates with a person, and that didn't work out. But that goes back to my point right now. I think when the new year comes along, a lot of people try to revamp their lives in a way where they're trying to do too much at once. You want to fix your finances, you want to fix your relationships, you want to fix your weight. There's just all these things, and people are saying go big or go home, and a lot of people try to do 20 things at once, and they get burned out with that. And by the end of February, March, a lot of people have just given up. So, what has worked for me, and in certain areas of my life, I'm far from perfect. I do think I can manifest certain things in my life while I'm still working on learning to manifest other things. I have found that just focusing in on one thing a month can be very helpful. Because I made those dietary changes last month, so it's just kind of my new normal now. So I have the time and the energy to just focus on, like I said, my money issues. And it comes from a very humbling place to even admit that I have money issues, because a lot of people are like, well, you're a dentist. Well, a lot of people think dentists are rich and greedy people. And I can tell you, there are some greedy, rich dentists, but there are a lot of struggling dentists out there too. Um, a little bit about my financial background is, I grew up poor. I had a roof over my head, I had food on the table, but I didn't grow up having an excess amount. And actually, I grew up always feeling behind. Like I was always the poor kid in class, and I always felt I didn't have as much as some of my friends did. So I always kind of grew up with that lack mentality, and also money and having a lot of it felt very safe. So when I got my first job at the age of 14, I didn't spend any of it. I stashed money away, and that was kind of my identity for a very long time. I was just a saver. I was a saver. I was a saver. Then I'm not exactly sure at what point that flipped and I became a spender. I want to say probably, maybe around COVID. A lot changed during COVID, where I kind of had this attitude that I'm working so hard. I just kind of want to spend what I'm making all the time. And you know, I was watching a YouTube video from a guy this morning, and he was kind of like, the pendulum always swings to the opposite side when you're trying to correct something. The spender goes to being an extreme saver. And I guess it made a lot of sense when, and this happens in a lot of areas of life. When you're trying to correct, you overcorrect and you end up swinging to the opposite side. So just sitting down and being able to go through a lot of my past issues, a lot of my current issues, and I do think a lot of my current issues come from the fact that I have not stayed at a job for a long enough period of time. And anytime you're switching jobs, there's always that gap period where you're not getting paid. And I think a lot of my resources were going to those times where I wasn't working. So I need to dig deep and try to figure out that wound as to why I don't feel like I fit in any kind of working environment right now. But going back to my original point, allow this to be a time where you just kind of check in with yourself. Don't be a statistic. Don't be one of those people who gives up on your goals and your dreams just because you feel overwhelmed by them. Maybe you're just trying to bite off more than you can chew. Maybe you're just trying to take on too much, trying to change too much too quickly, when you really just need to take a step back and just make a list and prioritize the things that you want to change, and just try to change one thing at a time. You know, I absolutely love journaling. I I actually went and purchased one of these. This is actually a sketch pad, and I got this idea from Clark Keggy, I think his name is, on YouTube, and he uses one of these and he goes through it every year, and I absolutely love this because sometimes I just have so much to write, and I have the space to actually go in and do it now. But journaling has been a huge game changer in my life. I mean, I've always kept a journal since I was 6, but up until like the last year or so, I've always just journaled my feelings. I've always just kind of used my journal to regurgitate how the day went and how I was feeling about any given situation, instead of using the journal to actually be proactive and creative. It's always been sort of a reactionary thing. When I started journaling from a space of writing down what I wanted, from like scripting to gratitude to writing letters to my inner child, just doing different exercises, it's really been a game changer in how I show up every single day, and how I track my goals, and how I am able to track, my progress with things. And focusing in on one thing a month, like I said, that's been pretty huge for me. If you've been having issues, just try that. Try focusing on one thing a month, and just focusing in on your why every single day. Just pick whatever you want to focus in, and just go all in on that one thing. They say it takes about 3 weeks for new neuronal pathways to develop in the brain. So, roughly a month. So, in that time period, just pick what it is that you want to focus in, and just go all in on that one thing. So, by the end of the month, and with your journaling, you can track your progress. I journal every single day. I absolutely love it. I encourage people to journal every single day. You'll be able to see the progress that you've made from the beginning of the month to the end of the month. And when you start a new month, you're starting the month with a new habit developed, and with a new mindset and appreciation towards this area of your life. So you're not starting from scratch, you're just sort of continuing. So, for my example, trying OMAD in the month of February has carried over into the month of March. So right now it's not something new to me. It's just what I've been doing. And with what I am doing with the money makeover that I'm doing, at the end of March, it's not going to be such a burden in the month of April. I don't know what my focus is going to be in the month of April. That's to be determined. But when the month of April starts, I will have that momentum with my money, with my diet, and maybe with a little bit of social. I may revisit that, but allow all your focus to be on one thing a month, and the momentum of that will carry on. So that's kind of what I'm doing, and I hope, like I said earlier, I hope that this will be a new year for you and not just another year. You know, don't allow old habits to creep in. Really focus in on trying to do something new and make this the best year possible for you and your family. And when you show up as the best version of you, the world benefits. So, peace, love, have a good week.